"I'll bury you under that lake," she screamed, eyes wild phone in hand, live streaming her meltdown. Standing in front of me was Victoria Green, the woman who had just listed my private lake online for $50,000 to random investors she'd never met. But this wasn't the first time she'd sold property that didn't belong to her. What she didn't realize was I had known everything. From the moment she stepped into this town with that fake smile I'd been watching, I waited. Quietly. I logged every lie, every drone photo she took without permission, every meeting she arranged behind closed doors. She thought she was playing us all. What she didn't know 6 months ago, I'd already sealed off her only path to that lake. Now, let me tell you the true story of how I dismantled a con artist, not with violence, but with evidence, the law, and sheer determination. Ready, this nightmare named Victoria starts right here. Every morning, just after dawn, I sit by that lake with Max, my golden retriever, and the last gift my wife ever gave me. The air is still. The water mirrors the trees, and for a few minutes I almost forget she's gone. 3 years ago, a drunk driver ran a red light and tore Emily out of my life. She had always dreamed of retiring somewhere peaceful. "Promise me we'll grow old by the lake," she'd whisper, flipping through magazines with sparkling eyes. After the funeral, I sold everything: the house, the cars, the career. I used it all to buy this 5-acre ranch with a 2-acre lake that looked exactly like the one she'd cut out and pinned to our fridge. This land wasn't just property. It was memory. It was sacred. And when Victoria moved in next door, I felt something shift in the wind. 6 months ago, she showed up, Victoria Green, 47. Sharp suit, perfect hair, all smiles. Too perfect. She bought the old McAllister house next to mine. Moved in with 3 trucks of purebred poodle and enough perfume to make the breeze smell like citrus poison. On day 1, she marched door to door with a clipboard introducing herself as the new president of the Lakeview Development Initiative. Mind you, there's no such organization. Our community has 22 homes, most of them retirees. She wasn't here to settle. She was here to stir things up. At the grocery store, she cornered folks with wild talk about ecotourism potential and rebranding the area as a luxury wellness retreat. But what caught my attention, what made me pause mid-aisle, was when she said loud enough for me to hear, "The lake is wasted on a lonely old man. It needs a visionary." And I knew exactly who she meant. One evening, just before sunset, I caught her standing at the edge of my fence. She wasn't admiring the view. She was measuring it with her eyes, lips moving silently, calculating. Max barked, but she didn't flinch. Just turned and smiled at me like I was the intruder. "Lovely lake," she called out. "Shame it's going to waste." I didn't respond. I watched her turn and stroll back to her side like she owned the whole damn valley. Later that night from my porch, I saw her again under the moonlight, holding up her phone, filming. Slowly panning across the water, then pointing toward the trees, gesturing like she was giving a presentation to someone invisible. That wasn't curiosity. That was intent. That was someone preparing to claim something that wasn't hers. And I realized then she hadn't moved here for peace. She'd moved here for the lake. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about her eyes. The way she looked at the lake like a predator sizing up prey. At 2:13 a.m., I opened my laptop and began digging. It didn't take long. Her real name was Victoria Green, born Victoria Lasky. She'd changed it twice in the last decade, once after a collapsed real estate firm in Florida, once again after a civil fraud lawsuit in Texas. Public records news clippings, even a Reddit thread with former clients accusing her of forging listings and disappearing with deposits. She was always one step ahead. Change her name, move to a smaller town, start again. But I couldn't shake a memory, one I hadn't touched in years. Emily and I, sitting on that very dock just weeks before she got sick, her head on my shoulder, the sky bleeding orange into the lake. She looked at me and said, "Promise me, Jack, no matter what happens, keep this place safe." This wasn't just a scam anymore. This was a war on a promise. And this time she picked the wrong town, because this time she wasn't the only one watching. Two days later, she came knocking. Sunday morning, sun barely up. I was on the porch with coffee and Max when I heard the click of heels on gravel. She stood there smiling like a realtor on an open house tour. "Morning, Jack," she beamed. I was thinking, wouldn't it be lovely to host a summer market by the lake? Maybe some paddle boards, food trucks, a little local flavor? I sipped my coffee. "It's a private lake." "Oh, I know," she said sweetly, "but the community could benefit. You'd be surprised how many grants are available for public access projects." There it was, that slip, that quiet nudge, testing the water. I didn't flinch. "Not interested," I replied. Her smile held, but her eyes flashed. As she walked away, she glanced back over her shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Jack. Things change all the time around here." By the end of the week, Victoria was everywhere. Clutching a leather-bound clipboard, knocking on doors, handing out homemade muffins with her business card taped underneath. She hosted a community brunch on her lawn white tent. Fake crystal glasses jazz playlist from her Bluetooth speaker. Imagine a place, she said loudly, where wellness meets waterfront. Where locals profit. Where visitors belong. She spoke like she already owned it. Most folks were polite, some were charmed. But the older neighbors' folks who'd lived here for decades just smiled and nodded, then called me later. "What the hell is she up to, Jack?" I told them to be patient, because while she was planting brochures and dreams, I was already planting trail cameras in the tree line. Motion sensors. Night vision. If Victoria thought she was the only one building a plan, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Monday morning, my phone buzzed at 6:41 a.m. By 6:50, I had 30 missed calls and 15 texts, all asking the same thing. Is the lake really for sale? I opened my laptop and froze. There it was, plastered across real estate forums, investor groups, and Facebook Marketplace. Private 2-acre lake, untapped potential, $50,000, exclusive listing by Victoria Green. There were drone photos of my property from angles only possible if she'd flown over it. A digital rendering showed cabins, docks, even a floating yoga studio. She'd built an entire fantasy on land that wasn't hers and listed it like it was already done. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an idea. It was a hostile takeover, and she'd just fired the first shot. By 7:15 a.m., my voicemail was full. One message offered $60,000 in cash if I'd close within a week. Another asked how many cabins the lake could support. Someone from Denver wanted to fly in and walk the site. I hadn't even put the coffee on. Emails rolled in with subject lines like investment opportunity inquiry and urgent offer on lake property. She hadn't just posted fake listings. She'd included my name, my address, my photos. She made it look like I was working with her. Max sat at the door, ears up, sensing something was wrong. I stared out at the lake. The reflection was calm. My mind was not. She was hijacking the one thing in this world I swore to protect. And the worst part, she wasn't done yet. I didn't call the police. I walked straight to her porch. Max followed, tense but silent. The morning air was cool, but my blood was hot. Victoria was in the garden trimming roses like nothing had happened. When she saw me, she lit up with that fake rehearsed smile. "Morning, Jack. Lovely day, isn't it?" I held up my phone. "You listed my lake for sale." She didn't blink. I prefer to think of it as mobilizing underutilized assets for community growth. It's private property. Mine. She tilted her head like a teacher correcting a student. "Do you have ironclad documentation? Because according to my contacts at the county office, the boundary lines here are fluid." It was a lie. My deed was bulletproof. But she said it with the confidence of someone who's used to winning through confusion. Then she tapped her phone and whispered without smiling, "You can't stop what's coming." Before I could respond, Victoria's face shifted. Her voice rose into a high-pitched scream as she threw herself backwards into a flower bed. "Help. He threatened me. He said he'd bury me under the lake. Someone call 911. She was already on the line. Loudspeaker. Crying, pleading. Theatrics polished to perfection. I stood frozen. Minutes later, sirens tore through the stillness. 2 cruisers skidded up her driveway. 4 officers stepped out, hands near their holsters. Victoria ran to them with her mascara streaked and her robe half open. "He's dangerous," she sobbed. "He came at me. He said I'd be next. Please don't let him hurt me." One officer turned to me. "Sir, step back, hands where we can see them." Max growled low behind me. I kept calm, but inside my chest a storm was breaking. She wasn't bluffing anymore. She was going for blood. They separated us, took statements, asked me to recount every word. Victoria was crying on cue, hand clutching her chest like she was the victim in a soap opera. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I pulled out my phone. "My neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds, has security cameras pointed right at that yard. Want to see the footage?" 10 minutes later, the officers watched as I stood motionless while Victoria flung herself backward, knocking over her own planter. No contact, no threat, no assault. The lead officer's jaw clenched. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a serious offense." Victoria's tears dried instantly. "That video doesn't show everything. He threatened me before it started." The sergeant sighed. "Both of you stay away from each other. No more calls unless someone's actually bleeding." As they walked away, Victoria glanced back and smiled like she'd just tested the fence and found the first crack. That night, I didn't sleep. I cleared the dining table and pulled out my old real estate files. County survey maps, parcel records, zoning overlays from decades past. Max lay under the table, eyes tracking my every move as I flipped through yellowed pages. There had to be something. After hours of searching, I found it. An old survey from 1960. Right between my land and the lake access road that Victoria was using stood a narrow 75-square-meter strip. Unlabeled, marked only as Plot X. I checked tax records. It hadn't been owned by anyone since 1987. The last owner died without heirs. The parcel had fallen through the cracks, never digitized. No one knew it existed, but I did. And it sat directly between Victoria's property and the water. Without it, her entire fantasy fell apart. At 6:55 a.m., I was the first in line at the county land office. Rita, the clerk who once helped me appraise farmland, raised an eyebrow when she saw me. "Plot N," I said. She blinked. That forgotten strip. It hadn't been claimed in 37 years. No tax paid, no ownership transfer. Legally, it had to be auctioned. Rita pinned the notice to the board herself. 3 days, she said. "You'll be the only bidder." I nodded, but I wasn't done. That afternoon, I quietly bought a second parcel. Plot Y, the mirror image of Plot X. A slim strip on the opposite side that completed the chokehold on lake access. Nobody noticed. Victoria was too busy handing out glossy brochures and shaking hands with men in suits. While she posed for investors, I was building a legal wall she wouldn't see coming until it was too late. At 4:30 a.m., 3 trucks rolled into my property. Steel posts, concrete. A welding crew from 3 counties over. I'd hired them with one goal: finish the fence before sunrise. By 6:45, the first section stood. 8 feet tall, chain link, angled deterrent wires, security cameras mounted high and silent. Max sat like a statue watching every movement. At 7:02, Victoria's kitchen light turned on. 3 minutes later, she burst out in a silk robe, eyes wide with fury. "What the hell is this, property improvements?" I said calmly. "You can't block the lake access," she snapped. "I'm not blocking anything. This is Plot Y. I own it. Your Plot X ends right there." She turned pale. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She walked the fence line, gripping the steel with white knuckles. And then she saw the cameras, and knew someone had outplayed her. That evening, just before dusk, a black SUV I didn't recognize slowed as it passed my driveway. It didn't stop, didn't honk, just crawled by with the windows cracked and music playing low. Max growled from the porch. The next night, 2 men appeared at the edge of my property. They didn't step over the line, just stood there under the trees watching. One of them finally spoke. "You've made it clear you're not selling, but maybe you should think about consequences." He smiled, but his eyes were cold. Max barked and lunged against the leash. They backed off slowly and vanished into the woods. I didn't chase them. I walked straight to the security system and reviewed every second of footage. Copied it to 3 drives. Victoria was done playing developer. Now she was playing gangster, and I wasn't about to blink. The next morning, Max wouldn't touch his water bowl. He sniffed it, whined, then backed away. Something was off. I knelt beside the dish and caught a faint chemical scent. Sweet. Wrong. A thin, oily sheen floated across the surface. I poured it into a glass jar and drove straight to the vet. Dr. Martinez didn't even hesitate. "This looks like antifreeze," she said. "It's deadly to dogs. Sweet tasting." Just a few sips could have killed him. My stomach twisted. Max had saved himself by instinct. Someone had walked up to my fence in the night and tried to murder my dog. This wasn't pressure anymore. It was war, and whoever did this just crossed a line I don't forgive. That afternoon, a dusty red pickup rolled down my driveway. Thomas Freeman stepped out still wearing his old army jacket, even in the summer heat. "Jesus, Jack. I heard about Max. You okay?" I nodded barely. Thomas had lived here his whole life. Retired sheriff's deputy. The kind of man who never used more words than necessary. He didn't ask permission. Just walked the fence line, studied the ground, checked the camera mounts. Then he turned to me. "You're being targeted, but you're not alone anymore." He opened his glove box and pulled out a stack of printed documents. "Let's expose her. Not with noise, with facts, with proof." He looked toward Victoria's house. "She thinks this is a game. She's about to meet the rules." And just like that, I wasn't fighting alone anymore. That night, my name exploded online. Victoria had gone full smear campaign. Reddit threads, Facebook groups, neighborhood forums, even a fake Twitter account under my name. Local recluse threatens single woman's safety. Lake owner under suspicion in wife's mysterious death. Photoshopped images of me looking angry. Screenshots of messages I'd never sent. Fake witness quotes. One headline screamed, "Dangerous widower controls public land through intimidation." Neighbors I hadn't seen in weeks were now sharing posts. Some even commented things like we always knew something was off about him. Reporters started calling. My voicemail filled with strangers demanding answers. Victoria had turned perception into a weapon, and she was firing it in every direction. Thomas read one post and muttered, "She's not just lying, she's building a narrative. And narratives can burn faster than truth if you don't move fast." I took my usual path that morning. A short walk through the backwoods near the creek where Max loved to chase squirrels. But halfway through, I felt it. Not fear. Instinct. The trees were too quiet. Then came the rustle behind me. Fast. Precise. I turned too late. A blunt force slammed into my shoulder, knocking me sideways into the brush. Pain shot down my ribs. I hit the ground hard. I looked up, but the figure was already gone. Hoodie. Gloves. Not a word spoken. Max came tearing through the trees seconds later, barking like hell. My breathing was ragged. My side throbbed. But I was alive. At home, Thomas helped me clean up. Cracked ribs, bruised pride. We didn't call the police. Not yet. Thomas just stared out the window and said quietly, "She's not just desperate. She's scared you're winning. And scared people make mistakes." That night, Thomas and I sat in my living room surrounded by printouts, flash drives, and a whiteboard full of dates. We had everything. Security footage of Victoria sneaking near the lake. Audio recordings of her pitching the fake resort to investors. Screenshots of the listing with my lake labeled development ready. And the video. the one where she screamed about being attacked right before she threw herself into her own flower bed. We organized it all into a digital folder, labeled it Victoria Green, Timeline of Fraud. I sent it to 3 lawyers, 2 local reporters, and every member of the County Planning Commission. Then I posted a teaser clip online. No commentary, just 10 seconds of her staging her fall. By morning, it had 2,000 views. The comments were starting to shift. Not fully. Not yet. But for the first time in weeks, truth had entered the conversation. By noon, the video had passed 10,000 views, and the silence broke. Sarah Wilson, who ran the town grocery, commented, "I saw her filming Jack's Lake weeks ago. Told my husband something felt off." Then came more. A former neighbor posted Victoria used the same scheme in Georgia. My uncle lost $20,000 to her fake investment pitch. A retired developer added screenshots of emails Victoria had sent using a different alias promising exclusive access to another private property. The comments piled up. "She's a grifter. I knew she was too slick. Why hasn't she been arrested?" Even the local paper ran a headline that day. Lake Dispute, or Real Estate Scam, Victoria's carefully crafted persona was cracking. She tried to comment spinning her lies, but no one was listening anymore. She wasn't controlling the narrative. She was drowning in it. 2 days later, a county sheriff's cruiser pulled into my driveway. Not for me. Officer Kim stepped out holding a folder an inch thick. "We've received multiple reports," she said, "about fraud, about impersonation, about harassment, all connected to Victoria Green." She wasn't smiling. Inside the folder were victim statements, screen captures, bank transfers. One investor had wired $30,000 based on her fake brochure. "This is no longer a neighborhood dispute," Officer Kim said. "This is criminal." I handed over everything Thomas and I had gathered. Duplicates, originals, video files sorted by date and timestamp. As she left, she paused. "Just so you know, she's not good at covering her tracks." Victoria's car was parked crooked across her driveway when the officer arrived. I watched from my porch as the door opened and her face froze at the sight of the badge. The next morning, I met with Robert Langston, a civil attorney from Lexington. He reviewed everything in silence. The listings, the false police report, the poisoning attempt, the attack in the woods. Then he looked up and said, "We're not just going after her for fraud. We're filing for emotional distress property interference, defamation, and attempted animal cruelty." He opened a fresh file and wrote her name at the top, Victoria Green, defendant. His legal assistant began scanning documents into a binder thicker than a phone book. Photos of Max's poisoned bowl, emails from investors, a map showing Plot X and Plot Y with red ink circling her dead-end access. "She's been sloppy," Langston said. "Greedy people usually are." He filed the lawsuit that afternoon. Victoria was served at her mailbox. She tore the envelope open and stood frozen, flipping through the pages. And for the first time she looked genuinely afraid. At sunset, I heard banging at my front gate. Victoria stood there in heels and a blazer, her hair wild fists clenched around a stack of court papers. "You think this scares me," she shouted. "You think some lawsuit is going to stop me?" Max stepped beside me low, growl vibrating in his throat. "I built this vision. I brought investors. I made this community valuable." She waved the lawsuit in the air like it was a parking ticket. "You're nobody, Jack. Just some sad widower with a dog and a fence." I didn't move. "Leave," I said, calm and flat. Her eyes filled with rage. "You'll regret this. I swear on everything you love." Then she turned and stormed back to her car tires screeching down the gravel. Thomas, who had just pulled in, stepped out of his truck and watched her disappear into the trees. "She's unraveling," he said. "And unraveling people make the biggest mistakes." The courtroom was packed. Local reporters, curious neighbors. 2 of Victoria's former investors sat in the front row, arms crossed. The judge called for silence as the first piece of evidence lit up the projector. A still frame of Victoria standing at the lake fence mid-scream. Then the video played. Her fake fall. Her bribing a witness. Her promising guaranteed lake access on land she never owned. Her lawyer tried to spin it. She was under emotional stress. She believed access was implied. There was no malicious intent. But the evidence kept coming. The deed maps, the forged brochures, the antifreeze test results, Max's vet report, my cracked ribs, the Reddit trail of other aliases across 3 states. The room got quieter with every exhibit. And when they played the audio of her threatening me at the gate, no one looked surprised anymore. Not even the jury. The jury was gone for less than an hour. When they returned, not a single face looked uncertain. The foreman stood voice steady. We find the defendant Victoria Green guilty on all counts. Fraud, defamation, harassment, false reporting, attempted poisoning, witness tampering. Victoria's shoulders sank. Her perfectly curated posture crumbled. Her lawyer asked for leniency, blamed stress, claimed she was misunderstood. The judge didn't flinch. Miss Green, you have manipulated, threatened, and defrauded innocent people across multiple jurisdictions. You weaponized perception. You endangered lives. And you did it all for profit. Then came the sentence. 18 years in federal prison. No parole for the first 5. Mandatory restitution to all victims. Victoria collapsed into her chair, and as they cuffed her and led her away, she turned her head to me one last time. This isn't over. I met her glare with 5 quiet words. Yes, it is Victoria. It finally is. A week later, the lake was quiet again. No tour buses, no suits, no shouting across fences. Just morning mist drifting over still water and Max lying by my feet, tail thumping softly on the porch. Thomas and Linda organized a small barbecue. The whole community showed up. Potluck tables lined with casserole dishes. Laughter. Music from an old radio. They brought a wooden sign carved by hand. Emily's Lake. Protected by wisdom and will. I didn't speak much that day. I just watched kids skip rocks across the surface. Watched neighbors who once doubted me shake my hand and thank me. Sarah Wilson hugged Max. He's a hero too, she said. And maybe he was. Maybe we both were. As the sun set in that soft orange way Emily used to love, I looked across the lake and for the first time in years felt completely still. Every morning now feels like a quiet victory. I sit on the same porch, same chair, coffee warm in my hands. Max curled at my feet. The lake doesn't shimmer any brighter, the trees don't dance any differently, but something has changed. Peace feels earned. Sometimes I still hear Emily's voice in the wind. This is perfect, Jack. Promise me we'll never leave. I did promise, and I kept it. Through courtrooms and threats, through lies and shadows, I held this ground not just for me, but for her. Max chases dragonflies along the bank, tail wagging like nothing ever happened. The scars are still there, but so is the strength. And now, when I cast my line into the water and watch the ripples stretch wide, I don't see a battleground. I see the place we dreamed of, the life she imagined, and the peace she would have loved. Never underestimate a grieving man with deep knowledge. Victoria thought she could bully her way through lies, manipulation, and fake charm. But greed and recklessness crumble fast when they meet truth, resilience, and quiet resolve. This wasn't just about land, it was about a promise, a memory, a sacred piece of someone I lost and refused to lose again. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: fight for what's yours. Not with fists or fury, but with clarity, patience, and purpose. Because no scam, no lie, no show of power can outrun the truth when it's held by someone who won't back down. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, give it a like, maybe subscribe or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Real life has villains too. But sometimes justice arrives with a fishing rod and a golden dog by your side.